There with a child, the billionaire had visited this cemetery hundreds of times, yet that morning felt different. As he stepped out of his black luxury car, his heart felt heavier than usual. He was used to silence, to marble headstones, to the quiet echo of regret. But that day, something unexpected waited for him among the graves. As he walked toward his daughter's resting place, he froze. There, kneeling beside her grave, was a janitor, in worn clothes, crying softly, while holding a small child in his arms. And in that moment, the billionaire felt something he hadn't felt in years: confusion and fear of the truth. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, like and share your thoughts in the comments. You're watching Kindness Diary, where powerful stories remind us that kindness can change lives in the most unexpected way. Richard Holloway was one of the richest men in America. His name appeared on business magazines. Skyscrapers carried his logo, and his bank account seemed endless, yet none of that mattered here. In this quiet cemetery, Richard was simply a father who had lost his only daughter. Emily had died 5 years earlier in a car accident. She was just 26, smart, warm-hearted, and kind in ways Richard never fully understood until she was gone. Since her death, Richard visited her grave every month. Always alone, always silent. That morning, he carried a bouquet of white lilies, Emily's favorite. As he approached her headstone, his eyes caught sight of a man in a dark blue janitor's uniform. The man looked tired. His shoulders were slumped, and his face was buried against the stone. In his arms, a baby no older than 1 year rested quietly. Richard stopped a few steps away. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. The janitor flinched and quickly stood up, holding the child close. He looked embarrassed, even afraid. I'm sorry, sir," the man said. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I clean the cemetery. I come here on my break." Richard frowned. "This grave belongs to my daughter." The janitor's eyes filled with tears again. "I know," he said softly. That answer startled Richard. "You know?" Richard asked. "How do you know?" The janitor looked down at the baby in his arms. He hesitated, then spoke slowly, as if each word carried weight. "Because she was my wife." The world seemed to stop. Richard stared at him. "That's not possible," he said. "My daughter wasn't married." The janitor shook his head gently. "She was. We didn't have a big wedding, no fancy rings, just love." Richard felt anger rise in his chest. "Emily would never hide something like that from me. She tried to tell you," the man replied quietly. "But you never had time." Those words cut deep. The janitor introduced himself as Daniel. He was a single father now, working 2 jobs to survive. Emily had met him years ago when she volunteered at a community center. Daniel had been cleaning floors there too. They talked. They laughed. They fell in love. "She said you were always busy," Daniel continued. "She didn't want to disappoint you." Richard remembered all the missed calls, all the dinners he postponed, all the times Emily said, "Dad, I need to talk to you," and he answered, "Later." "And the baby?" Richard asked, his voice trembling. Daniel gently lifted the child. "This is Noah," he said, "your grandson." The word echoed in Richard's ears. Grandson? Richard looked at the baby. Noah had Emily's eyes, the same soft gaze, the same quiet calm. Tears welled up in Richard's eyes for the first time in years. "Why come here?" Richard asked. Daniel knelt back down beside the grave. "I wanted Noah to know his mother," he said. "I tell him stories about how kind she was, how she believed people mattered more than money." Richard swallowed hard. "I didn't know," he whispered. Daniel nodded. "She hoped one day you would." Silence wrapped around them. The wind moved through the trees. Birds sang somewhere in the distance. Finally Richard spoke. "You shouldn't be cleaning floors to survive," he said. "Your family." Daniel looked up, surprised. "Sir, I don't want money. I just want my son to grow up loved." Richard knelt down beside him. The billionaire, in his expensive suit, placed the lilies gently on Emily's grave. "You already taught him that," Richard said. "But let me help. Let me be his grandfather." Daniel hesitated. Years of struggle had taught him not to trust promises easily. Richard reached out and gently touched Noah's tiny hand. The baby smiled. "I failed my daughter," Richard said quietly. "I won't fail her son." From that day on, everything changed. Richard helped Daniel find a better job, not through connections, but through education. He paid for childcare, not as charity, but as family support. He visited Daniel and Noah every weekend. Slowly walls fell. One afternoon, as Noah took his first steps, Richard cried openly. He realized something money had never taught him. Kindness doesn't come from wealth, it creates it. Months later, Richard returned to the cemetery. This time he wasn't alone. Daniel walked beside him. Noah toddled between them, holding both their hands. Richard knelt at Emily's grave and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered, "for teaching me what matters." As they walked away, Richard looked back once more. He didn't feel the same heaviness anymore. Loss had led him to love. Pride had led him to humility. And kindness had rebuilt what success never could. Kindness doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need permission. Sometimes it begins with listening and grows into a second chance. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you to choose kindness today. You never know whose life or whose future you might change just by caring.